Hello, first grade. Today we're going to use our Story Elements packet. You're going to need your Story Elements packet, and then you're going to need to turn to this page that says title of the story and then beginning, middle, and end. Okay, so the story that we're going to read today to go along with this is Little Red Riding Hood. So you're going to listen to the story, and then we're going to write in the beginning, middle, and end. Okay? Little Red Riding Hood. This version is written by Miles Kelly. Little Red Riding Hood lived in a cottage by a wood. One day her mother said, "Your grandma is ill. Please take this basket of cakes and fruit to her." So Little Red Riding Hood set off with the basket, wearing her red cape. "Don't talk to strangers, especially not wolves," her mother called. "Bye, Mom." Little Red Riding Hood walked through the wood. The trees were tall and made scary shadows. Suddenly, a wolf jumped out. "Hello," growled the wolf. "Where are you going?" "I'm taking some cakes and fruit to my grandma," said Little Red Riding Hood. "What a sweet child you are," said the wolf. "Why not pick your grandma some flowers, too?" With that, the big bad wolf ran off, leaving Little Red Riding Hood happily picking flowers. Little did she know the wolf had raced ahead to Grandma's house. When he arrived, the wolf knocked softly on the door. "Let me in, Grandma," he called. "I've brought you some cakes and fruits." "It's me, Grandma." But Grandma wasn't silly. "That's not Little Red Riding Hood's voice," she said. Quickly, she made her bed and hid in a closet. "Grandma?" The wolf burst into the cottage, but Grandma was nowhere to be seen. So he dressed himself in her nightgown and bedcap and got into bed. "Grandma, it's me!" Soon Little Red Riding Hood knocked on the door. "Come in, dear," snarled the wolf in his nicest voice. "Grandma, you look odd," said Little Red Riding Hood. "Come and sit beside me, dear," growled the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood sat on the bed. "What big ears you have, Grandma," she said. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," replied the wolf. "What big eyes you have, Grandma." "All the better to see you with, dear." "And your teeth are just huge," exclaimed Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to eat you with," said the wolf, and he pounced. Little Red Riding Hood screamed loudly and ran away. The wolf leaped after her, but suddenly there was a banging at the door. What do you think that could be? Do you know who's there? Little Red Riding Hood opened the door. There stood a woodcutter who had heard her screams. He raised his axe. With a howl of fear, the big bad wolf dashed past the woodcutter, out of the cottage, and away into the forest. Little Red Riding Hood and the woodcutter heard a strange knocking coming from the bedroom. They opened the closet door, and out tumbled Grandma. "This is a cause for celebration," exclaimed Grandma. So she laid the table, and they all sat down to tea and cakes. Yummy! Never again did Little Red Riding Hood talk to strangers. As for the wolf, he kept well away from little girls, especially those wearing capes. The end. Okay, so now you need to grab your story elements so that we can talk about this book. So at the top, at the top of the page says title of the story. And you remember that the title of the story is just the name of the story. So the title of this is Little Red Riding Hood. So go ahead and write that in the spot where it says title. Right there. Title starts with T, title. And then let's talk about what happened in the beginning of the story. So in the beginning of Little Red Riding Hood, she starts off at home, and her mother says to take some stuff to Grandma and to go through the woods, but not to talk to the wolf. So you can write at the beginning, Little Red Riding Hood sets off for Grandma's house. That's not a capital. So in the place where it says beginning or the first part of the story, you're going to write right here, Little Red Riding Hood sets off for Grandma's house. So if you want to pause this so that you can pause and write, go ahead and pause. All right, so next in the story, or the middle part of the story, is what happens next. So in the middle part of the story, there's a couple things that happen. And the first thing that happens is, we'll call her Little Red instead of Little Red Riding Hood, because we'd be writing that out a lot. It would take up a lot of space. So the first thing that happens is Little Red meets the wolf. And then the wolf goes to Grandma's house. And Little Red Riding Hood, while the wolf is going to Grandma's house, Little Red is picking flowers. You may not have enough room to write all of this in the middle portion, but I want you to try your best. Make sure you're making those spaces in between your words. So go ahead and write what happens in the middle of the story, right here in this part that says middle. Okay, go ahead and pause the video so you can write that. All right, and now what happens at the end of the story? So the last part of the story, we have Little Red discovering the wolf posed as Grandma. So Little Red finds the wolf. The woodcutter comes to save the day. comes to Grandma's house. He discovers them. Discovers the wolf who runs away. And then they celebrate. So again, a lot of things to write. You can choose the sentence to write for the ending. Little Red finds the wolf. The woodcutter discovers the wolf who runs away, and they celebrate. So if you want to pause so you can write one of those on the ending part, go ahead and pause now. Okay. So that is how we would sequence a story from what happens in the beginning, the middle, and the end. And the story we sequenced today is Little Red Riding Hood. You can do this with any of the stories that you read. You can sequence it from beginning, middle, and end. Okay? I loved this story, Little Red Riding Hood. It's a fairy tale story, and remember earlier in the year we talked about how fairy tales are things that have things that could be true and things that aren't true. Okay?